So we've assembled what I think is a very diverse and powerful panel to discuss these issues. It is being video recorded, so there will be a permanent record of this, and we'll be able to use it in other places to raise the issues of child protection and tourism. If you are tweeting or twittering, and I'd encourage you to do so, please use the hashtag WTMWRTD, and there will be a legacy website with this material on it, which will be on the RT Forum website. The address is at the bottom. But I'm going to introduce our first speaker. We've got 5 speakers. The first one is Stephen Farrant from the International Tourism Partnership, and he's going to be talking about taking responsibility for dealing particularly with global crime, the global crime of child trafficking. So Stephen, if you'd like to take the platform.
Thank you, Harold. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here to discuss a very sobering, very difficult issue, but an incredibly important issue. I'm Stephen Farrant. I head up the International Tourism Partnership, and I want to talk about some practical responses to the global crime, and it is a crime, of trafficking and the child protection issues that come from that. So very quickly, just to kind of recap in 30 seconds who ITP is. We act globally as a not-for-profit organisation to address the critical sustainability issues that face the global hospitality industry. We have a membership base of currently 16 of the leading global hotel companies who work with us on a wide range of issues, and each of them individually and us collectively recognise that topics as complex as human trafficking or child protection and getting these things right are just too big for individual companies to adequately address on their own, and so we bring them together to create that collective action. All of our work, whether we range from carbon measurement on the one side of the spectrum through water and supply chain and youth employment schemes, right through to human trafficking, which is the context for today's discussion. In all of those areas of our work, we're always focused on finding and developing and encouraging best practice, and on critically developing practical responses. So what do we now do about this? Okay, so in terms of human trafficking work, we set up a working group among our membership in late 2010, so just on 2 years ago now, with the aim of doing 3 things. Firstly, to share resources and accelerate learning. We started in a position where, frankly, there were hotel companies out there that were saying, why are you talking to me about human trafficking? I run a hotel. I'm not sure I get the link. We put it very squarely on the radar with all of our members and with the wider industry. And we've helped those we've allowed those who are right out in the lead on this issue to share what they've been doing with many of the others so that people can accelerate the learning. We've developed an industry-wide position statement which explains very clearly how the hotel industry takes responsibility for the human trafficking issue, and that's available for view on our website. And thirdly, and what I want to talk about in detail today, is a pilot program to reintegrate survivors of trafficking through an established employability program that we've been running since 2004, which some of you may have heard of, the Youth Career Initiative. As I say, we've been running it since 2004. It's currently operational in 12 countries around the world, as shown on the map here. And 18 months ago, the US State Department very kindly agreed to fund a pilot program with us whereby we would test the capacity of this program to reintegrate victims of trafficking back into productive society and legitimate employment. Essentially, the YCI program, as it has existed since 2004, is a 6-month employability program with mentoring, business skills, life skills interventions, delivered through a unique partnership with the hospitality industry in these locations. And we've adapted that with the US State Department's funding to include, as it says here, 20% of the intake in each year coming from survivors of trafficking. So our regular YCI intake is young kids, typically aged 18 to 21-year-olds, Sometimes it's a bit younger, depending on the market. And they all come into the program with no prospect of legitimate employment, of education or training. That's the baseline YCI program. What we did with US state funding was to try bringing in 20% of that mix from specialist shelters and refuges who are helping and supporting victims and survivors of trafficking. And we did this first in Mexico City. Over the 6 months, there was a package of interventions that we brought to bear on that Mexico City pilot, raising awareness on the human trafficking issue through training, creating capacity in our local partners, providing specialist support for the survivors themselves and also for the key staff within the hotel companies and our local partner NGOs who were supporting the program, providing mentorship for the young people through the program and making sure that they had plenty of access to career advice and support and job placement after the 6-month employability program that we ran. So we've delivered that now in Mexico. We're now taking that as stage 2 to Hanoi, and the US State Department, on the basis of those 2 pilots, is now extending the relationship for a further 5 markets, which we'll be taking forwards over the next 3 years. Very quickly then on the staff awareness training, because so much of this is about awareness, it's about what people can spot and anticipate and how they can help to intervene if they see something that looks suspicious. We developed a module with input directly from the US State Department, from many of our corporate partners, people like Carlson, people like Hilton, Marriott International, many of the NGOs that we are working with in this space, the Polaris Project in the US, and Human Trafficking Now, Stop the Traffic, and many others. The awareness training program is directed at senior hotel staff, and I should say it is very much complementary to and additional to the existing increasingly extensive training programs that the major hotel companies are rolling out across their entire global workforce as well. And there are 4 main modules to the workshop. The first was really giving participants, and again, these aren't the survivors of trafficking themselves, these are the professionals involved in delivering the 6-month employability program. So these are hotel HR staff, they're general managers, they're the NGO workers and so on. So the first module is about giving these people a clear awareness and understanding of trafficking and its underlying causes. The second module goes into more detail within the hospitality industry and explains where the connections are, where the vulnerabilities, the responsibilities, the liabilities are for our hotel industry, hotel property. The third module looks specifically from the survivor's perspective and gets to the root of some of the emotional, physical experience that they have been through and providing better insights into how you can anticipate and understand and meet the needs of these young people as they try to get back on track with their lives. And then the fourth module is focusing in very much on the YCI program and the elaborate curriculum that we have and how that then can directly enable these young people to go on to, with new confidence, to be able to make informed choices about what they want to do with their lives. And so in Mexico City, which is the one that started September 2011 and has concluded in March of this year, our local partner out in Mexico City for many years now has been the Fundación Infantia. We work with 5 local specialist shelters who are listed there on the second bullet point. And these were the people who took us to the young people who had been through some kind of trafficking, who were vulnerable and at risk, but who were on track through their rehabilitation and who were suitable to go through the 6-month program. We took 24 of these young people in. So I mentioned that the US State Department required a 20% requirement in our total cohort. In fact, the 24 there is, I think, about 40% of the total cohort. So we got many more survivors of trafficking than we were obligated to in that first iteration. However, of the 24, and I'm being very honest with the results here, of the 24, this was the first time we did this, 13, so just over half of the group, chose not to complete the program. And I can come back to the reasons, some of the reasons why. However, 11 did graduate after 6 months of very intensive support and training, both business skills, life skills, practical classroom. And of those 11 who graduated, 8 of them are currently employed now within the hospitality industry. 1 has returned back to education. 1 more is still negotiating and hopefully about to land a job in the hotel industry. So out of those that graduated, we've got a very strong success rate of people being brought back into legitimate employment and moving on with their lives. We're out of time. I can explain further in the Q&A kind of some of the lessons that came from this, why some dropped out. 3 concluding thoughts. Collaboration. This is unfortunately a growing global crime. It affects all industry sectors. The only way we can cut into it is through collaboration. That's absolutely essential. Public, private, voluntary, we've all got to work together. Secondly, I do think from this first pilot there is significant potential to scale up the project, and that's what we're planning to do from our side. And thirdly, there can be no room for complacency. If anybody thinks that trafficking only affects developing markets, Thailand, Latin America, that's not the case. It happens everywhere, including here. Let's be realistic. Cases of child trafficking in the hotel industry are extremely rare, fortunately, but they do happen, and the industry has a huge responsibility to live up to that obligation and to do something practical to try and root it out. I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks. I'm going to ask Claire Ellaway to come next and to share her thinking about this from World Challenge expeditions. Hopefully that will be good.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. I'd like to thank the World Travel Market for asking World Challenge to present today. World Challenge provides educational expeditions to the developing world for young people, and we send approximately 8,000 young people overseas every year. And throughout the duration of their expedition, which is about 4 weeks in the developing world, they're interacting with local people all the time, whether it's on a project site with local school teachers or whether it's trekking in the jungle with local guides and porters. So how do we safeguard the young people that we're sending away on these expeditions? Well, clearly the welfare of all of young people is absolutely paramount. Historically, the safety procedures for young people on adventurous travel has been quite inconsistent. But now in the UK, with the British Standard 8848 and the Learning Outside the Classroom Quality Badge, customers can be a little bit more reassured about the certain criteria that providers need to meet, and particularly when they're stipulating things such as strict background and experience checks for the adults that accompany our young people on these expeditions. Our adventurous expeditions are designed to be exciting and to be challenging, but as we all know, no adventure can really be that risk-free. So what we're trying to do is aiming to minimise that risk as much as possible. So we put in risk assessments in place, crisis management plans, all kinds of policies and procedures. However, every year we face a number of incidents, and in particularly 1 or 2 child protection incidents crop up on our expeditions every year. And these can be anything really. To give you a few examples, an example of on an African campsite when a security guard inappropriately gropes the chest of a young female student while she's waiting outside the toilets for her friend to come out. Or maybe an inappropriate hug or a kiss from a local village chief when he's thanking the students for the project that they've just done in the local community. The difficulties that we face is that we're dealing with teenagers at an age when they come across as probably a lot more mature than they really are. Therefore, that leads us into situations when potentially the trekking guide might think that the 16-year-old is fair game. Our expeditions are emotionally and physically challenging the young students, and they're often fairly vulnerable. And they can be seen as an exotic person from the local people, which is a bit of a recipe for things to go wrong with people from other cultures which don't really understand the situations that they're in. So what can organisations like ours and others do about this? Well, certainly we can ensure that we've all got a very robust child protection policy in place, and the adult leaders that go on our trips know what to look out for, a policy that's got a really strong reporting lines. We can look at establishing a code of behaviour between the group before they depart to go overseas. It's actually a contractual requirement for going on a World Challenge expedition for a set of rules to be drawn up with the students as a code of behaviour. Covers things like bullying or alcohol, but in particular it covers things like sexual relations. So this needs to cover the adult staff that are going on the trip, the local population that you interact with, as well as the team members as a group. We also have a code of behaviour for the adults, which covers an exhaustive list. Things like making sure that the team aren't forming inappropriate relations, ensuring there's separate sleeping arrangements. We can also continue to stress the importance of cultural sensitivity and address the way that our students interact, the way that they behave, and the way they dress in the destinations that they're visiting. We can look at contracts as well. Where we've got contracts with some of our suppliers, we can make sure that we include some form of child protection clause within our contracts, ensuring that the students or the children are protected against potential sexual abuse on the premises, and that the supplier and the employees are aware of our child protection policy, of our organisation, and the code of behaviour that we've got in agreement with the adults that travel with our students, and making sure that they follow the recommendations of reporting lines if they see any suspicious behaviour. And this is regardless of whether it's a young person as a tourist, one of our students, or whether it's a local individual. We can also look at training. In most cases, the individuals that are committing the wrongdoing are potentially someone that we don't have a supplier contract with. So maybe that's the local guide or the village chief, for example. The vast majority of the adults that our students interact with come across as incredibly professional. But we need to look at increasing our training and the work that we do with our in-country agents, making sure that we're encouraging the sort of familiarity with our procedures, offer some more practical guidance on what actions should be avoided, what constitutes safe practices, raising the awareness that certain behaviour is not acceptable, and where appropriate, this can be disseminated out to the local community. But how can we actually safeguard the young people that we meet when we go overseas to the developing world? Well, firstly, we can make sure that our adult leaders and our students are a lot more aware of child exploitation in the destinations that they go to visit. We really need to push this onto the agenda. This can be included in potentially our literature or our manuals or our pre-expedition briefings that the students have. We can do more to encourage the leaders and the team members to report any wrongdoings or suspicious behaviour that they might see when they're on those 4 weeks overseas. And we can have a clear system in place so that it's reported through to our in-country agents or maybe some external organisations. Secondly, we can look at potentially addressing the issue of child labour, making sure that our agents that we work with aren't utilising family or friends who are underage in any of the supporting activities for World Challenge. But I would like to extend this to some of our supplier contracts. If young people are working, we need to make sure that the contracts are very clear, that they're protected by local legislation, and that the conditions that they're working in are specifically designed to protect them. Thirdly, we can do things such as avoid the promotion of begging and theft by making sure that our students aren't handing out money or other gifts. There are a lot more appropriate ways of doing this, and we can use our in-country agents to suggest legitimate charities to coordinate this. We can encourage this awareness with our students throughout the whole time on expedition. We can also make sure that we continue to develop relationships with organisations when we're working on our project phase, that we're working with credible, sustainable projects in the communities that we visit, rather than simply observing children in local orphanages and contributing funds. Support, for example, vocational training projects. This is where our local in-country agents come into play to help identify these organisations that keep within these kind of principles. During our project phase, where our students spend about 4 or 5 days on a community project, we can also ensure that our students are working with organisations that provide direct care and service for young people. So, for example, this shot you can see on the screen here is from Akaneo Voko in Madagascar, an organisation that shelters and nurtures destitute young people. Their halfway home encourages self-sufficiency and the taking on of greater responsibility for the young people that stay at that home. Our groups work with those young people in Madagascar to help build things such as storage facilities for their food, mend basketball posts, prepare land for planting vegetables. Creating opportunities for young people in the developing world to interact with their direct peers is a really powerful tool. It helps share experience of education, and the realities of day-to-day life promote some kind of awareness and inspires learning. So finally, to conclude, as travel providers, we all must be responsible. to keep the safeguarding of young people, whether it's the young people we go and visit or the young people we go and send out on expeditions. We must keep that in the forefront of our minds and the actions that we take. We need to make sure we've got tight policies and procedures in place and make sure that we share this by increasing the awareness of these issues by putting it on everybody's agenda. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Claire. Marina, can I ask you to come and make your presentation from the UNWTO? I think it's fair to say that Marina's been working on this issue for a very long time, so beginning to see some progress at the international level. Please, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for inviting UNWTO to participate in this session. Well, most of us will agree that tourism exponential growth has increased wealth and prosperities in many parts of the world. However, tourism's rise has brought with it serious challenges, and the most disturbing of it is the misuse of tourism infrastructure to abuse and exploit children. We all know that tourism is not the cause of child exploitation or child trafficking, but it may aggravate the problem when its infrastructure, transport, accommodation, and services are co-opted for nefarious ends by human traffickers and child offenders when they travel abroad. Also, the demand for cheap labor generated by popular tourism destinations can create lucrative markets for prostitution, street begging, and other forms of exploitative labor in guest houses, restaurants, bars, or beaches. UNWTO's position on this issue is clear. Our guiding document, policy guiding document, the Global Code of Ethics for Tourism, is a roadmap for sustainable and responsible tourism development, and it proclaims a very simple and powerful idea. This is the exploitation of human beings in any form, particularly sexual, especially when applied to children, conflicts with the fundamental aims of tourism and is the negation of tourism. This maxim has directed UNWTO's child protection efforts over a decade. To raise awareness of our member states and industry partners and mobilize them in the prevention of sexual exploitation of children or the exploitation in general, we have established a World Tourism Network on the protection of children, which was formerly known as the Task Force for the Protection of Children. And this is a global action platform of tourism players, both from the public, the private, and also the civil society sectors. Its aim is to address the exploitation of children in any forms, be it sexual exploitation, child labor, or trafficking in children. Through this network, the UNWTO has sought since 1998 to stimulate collaborative action through the creation of partnerships between the different stakeholders, government, industry, and civil society, and the cooperation of tourist generating and destination countries. UNWTO has further urged governments to tighten the legislation, the national legislation in this field, and to establish hotlines or special child victims units or focal points. Similarly, we have asked the industry, the tourism companies, to adopt professional codes of conduct to train their staff and inform the travelers about the problem. Awareness raising actions through in-flight videos, brochures, posters, or publicity campaigns at major tourism events as this one help educate travelers and the industry itself about the crime of child sexual exploitation or trafficking. UNWTO's own international awareness raising campaign has sought to draw the attention to child exploitation in tourism. It is entitled Don't Let Child Abuse Travel, and was created in collaboration with private and public sector partners, including the European Union, ECPAT, and other organizations such as ILO, UNICEF, IHRA, and IATA, and many others. More recently, in April this year, we have signed a collaboration agreement with UNODC, the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, to help eradicate trafficking within the tourism sector. Under this agreement, our two organizations are preparing an awareness-raising campaign against organized crime and the trafficking of human beings, especially children, which is going to be launched next year. Equally, in an effort to promote responsible and ethical behavior of tourists and travelers in general, but also with regard to children's rights, our organization is disseminating a flyer to the traveling public with the help of NGOs and the tourism companies. The flyer provides practical tips to be a responsible traveler and was issued by the World Committee on Tourism Ethics, which is the independent body in charge of monitoring the implementation of the different principles of the Code of Ethics. Similarly, to promote ethical practices among tourism businesses, our organization UNWTO has recently formulated a private sector commitment to the Global Code of Ethics. Through this commitment, or the companies, by signing this commitment in the presence of the UNWTO General Secretary and the highest tourism authorities in the countries, the companies and associations who signed this commitment make a public declaration to uphold the principles of the Global Code of Ethics, including the protection of children in tourism. And also, these companies further commit to report to the World Committee on Tourism Ethics on the different actions and measures they have taken to implement the different ethical principles. Over this past year, a growing number of companies have, both in Spain, Germany, Romania, and other countries have signed this commitment, and many other companies in other countries are following suit in the coming months. In conclusion, I would like to say that indeed tourism industry must play an active role in the prevention of exploitation of children and trafficking of children in tourism. But it is also equally crucial that the industry cooperates with the public sector to address the root causes and the underlying factors that contribute to the exploitation and trafficking of children and adolescents, which are poverty, social exclusion, gender inequality, and the lack of social economic opportunities. And this they can do through investing in developing schemes and community empowerment, or youth skills development programs such as the Youth Career Initiative and other similar programs. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. We've just got two more presentations to come. Julie Naylor is here. She's going to talk about what Thomas Cook has been doing on this issue. And to be honest, when I heard about this, it quite took my breath away, Julie. So I hope you're going to take the audience's breath away.
Hopefully so.
As well. So Julie Naylor from Thomas Cook talking about what they've been doing on child protection.
Thank you very much. Right, good afternoon everybody. Child protection is a very diverse subject, and whilst we've made significant moves to publicise and support the subject of child exploitation and trafficking, our biggest challenge in the travel industry impacts us on a day-to-day basis and centres around protecting the children that we take on holiday. Now, within Thomas Cook, we have a welfare team which consists of 2 full-time staff whose sole responsibility is to support customers who find themselves in difficulty overseas. Child protection issues account for 15% of the work that they deal with. So what does child protection mean in the UK travel industry? Social problems. Whatever social difficulties are apparent in the UK, these are exaggerated on holiday due to changes in routine and increased social activity. All-inclusive holidays are also becoming more popular, which brings challenges with excessive alcohol consumption, which can lead to child protection issues. Cultural differences. The European way of life is very family orientated, and people will quite happily cuddle children as a means of showing affection. Due to heightened media awareness of child abuse cases in the UK, as a nation we've become a little bit fearful of this level of unfamiliarity, and it can be quite comfortable for holidaymakers. At times, inappropriate relationships can develop with young teenagers where their age is either not disclosed or is not easily identifiable. And sexual and physical abuse and paedophilia, although extremely rare, unfortunately, they do happen. So at Thomas Cook, we don't profess to be experts in child protection, but it is a problem that it exists, and it's important that we engage with experts to assist us to manage these situations locally. So Hempsel's Consultants is an independent consultant who specialises in delivering advice, training and research to companies who work with children. Hempsel sit on our Child Protection Committee and were instrumental in the building of our policy in 2004. Social services in the UK and locally, whenever we deal with the child protection issue, we always engage with social services, particularly in the UK, because we take their advice on how to deal with the matters locally. And then the UK and the local police, hugely important in helping us deal with these issues, where the safety of a child has been compromised. There are differentiated levels of service depending on what country customers are on holiday, but they're always generally extremely supportive. So what are we doing as Thomas Cook to protect the children in our care? We have a dedicated welfare team in the UK, as I mentioned earlier. Child protection training is part of our reps' induction programmes. The senior staff receive training on the technicalities of our policy and how to manage the situations locally. Our Child Protection Committee meet every year with Hempsels and discuss changes in legislation to ensure that our policy is relevant and up to date. Training for hoteliers to deliver to their own staff is provided as and when it's needed. And within all of our contracts, we have a clause relating to safeguarding children. Support for the families both locally and on the return to the UK is paramount, which is provided by our welfare team. And unfortunately, overindulgence in alcohol with young teenagers is a bit of a challenge. So we talk about responsible use of alcohol in welcome meetings within some of our youth market destinations. So what are we doing at Thomas Cook to protect children from exploitation and trafficking? We're signatories to the code, which Marina talked about earlier. We have adopted a group-wide child protection policy across the whole company, not just in the UK, but in Europe and other destinations. We've developed an online training module for our customer-facing airline staff on child trafficking, and similar training was given to our hosts during the London 2012 Olympic Games. Our overseas induction on safeguarding children also includes information about trafficking and exploitation. And we publicise information on our website, ticket packs and various other documentation about child exploitation. So just as important, I'll carry on. Just as important, what's the industry doing to protect children overseas? The Federation of Tour Operators work very closely with ABTA to support and guide their members on child protection initiatives. And some of the initiatives that they make available to the industry to support this, they have a modular online training tool called Every Child Everywhere, which supports tour operators in implementing child protection policies and dealing with situations locally. Technical guidelines on children's safety, such as in children's clubs, a sustainability certification scheme called Travel Life, which is aimed at hotels and includes both environmental and social criteria. NSPCC training material to educate hoteliers on the importance of managing child protection and welfare issues at their premises. And NSPCC training material to educate hoteliers on the importance of managing child protection and welfare issues at their premises. They also speak with destination ministers and encourage training events for accommodation providers and other stakeholders. And they encourage members and hoteliers to develop their own child protection policies. So child protection issues happen wherever we travel in the world, and it cannot be ignored. As an industry, we have a responsibility to work together to protect the children within our care. The quote from Lord Laming following the Victoria Climby inquiry pretty much sums it up for me, which is the support and protection of children cannot be achieved by a single agency. Every service has to play its part. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Julie. One of the reasons I was so keen to have Thomas Cook come and talk about this is that very often the child protection issue is seen as something that just happens in the developing world. And as Stephen and Julie have pointed out, it's an issue in our own society. As anybody who sees the newspapers while you're here in London will be aware, we've got some pretty high-profile cases beginning to emerge in the British media. But I want to finish the presentations by asking Michael Horton to come and talk about the experience that Concert has been having in Cambodia. And also, Michael, as you come to the platform, to acknowledge that it was really your presentation last year that pushed this back onto the agenda. And I thank you for that. So, Michael Horton from Concert.
Well, good afternoon, and I too would like to thank the organisers for giving me the opportunity today to talk about what I see out in a destination in one of the poorest countries of the world, in a developing country where many people are going out and visiting. I'll talk a little bit right at the end about what Concert does, but we have members on the panel here who we are seeing now more and more people wanting to travel overseas and do outward bound activities, volunteering, offering support for various charities and organisations in the developing world. And there is a paradox in this, and there's a real tragedy in that many of the attempts by genuine kind people are unwittingly causing suffering to the children across the developing world. We've heard a lot this afternoon so far about child safety for our children, and that's absolutely correct, and it's how it should be. But we see significant problems with the children who are already extremely disadvantaged, suffering at the hands, and the tourism industry is sort of facilitating a lot of what's going on. Now, development work is extremely complicated. Indeed, development professionals themselves come under a lot of criticism. I brought a couple of books, but the book Dead Aid. There's many criticisms about the development world in itself. And then we've got tourism becoming increasingly involved in delivering development. And tourism enterprises, as we all know, work in very competitive market. We're dealing, members of the public, they're dealing with us at our most self-centred and demanding. We're on holiday. And the tourism industry is very good at delivering what its customers, we, want. The tourism industry is very good at tourism. And there is a belief, if we look at the Cambodian situation, that's been unwittingly perpetuated by the industry, that orphanages in countries like Cambodia represent the best option for desperately poor children and their families. Providing resources, visiting, volunteering is becoming very popular, and the tourism industry responds to that need. I'm very interested to hear what was going on today, where everybody is now beginning to realise that maybe orphanages are not all that they cracked up to be, but the number of times that we can keep saying that can only help. In Cambodia, where there's very little regulation, we have pure supply and demand, but it's turned on its head. The demand that's being met is not the demand from poor families and destitute families, it's the demand from people that want to go and help. Local people and foreigners start NGOs, and they increase the supply to meet that demand. These are true statistics from Cambodia. 1.4 million arrivals in 2005, 2.88 million arrivals in 2011, 100% increase, a 100% increase in Cambodian orphanages. But Cambodian orphan numbers are going down. Even more perversely, most of the children in Cambodian orphanages are not orphans. 75% of them are from families who are facing severe problems. So what's the problem with orphanages? Well, the very word orphanage is very emotive, makes us think of all sorts of pictures, but they are causing, in the developing world, a vicious cycle. They're sucking in the resources and choking off the development of more appropriate community-based solutions. In common across the developing world, there's little or no government support. People are living in desperate poverty and they need help. And in Cambodia, a place I know about the best, even the police, social services and other agencies will take children to orphanages. That reinforces a belief by those that run them and by those that support them that they're doing the right thing. The reality is, of course, that often it's the only option, Hobson's choice. So what's the problem with them? As I say, well, they needlessly break up families. Families are not given a choice. We'll go a little bit more about that in a second. The top group of issues happen across the vast majority of orphanages in Cambodia. And two things, they fall into three areas really. No assessment of children coming in, so nobody looks to see if that's the best option. Poor care whilst they're in, and then in many cases unceremoniously kicked out when children get to be 18. The bottom group happen in a significant minority of cases, and we've heard mentions of that this afternoon. Corruption for sure, exploitation of children, being made to work, sing, dance, paint, being kept artificially dirty, hungry to encourage us to give. Physical, mental and sexual abuse, and in Siem Reap, the town where I live, certainly being used as centres for trafficking children. What's it got to do with the tourism industry? Well, the tourism industry markets activities for young people, and of course this is a profit-making business, so we have to market them in a very exciting way. We'll show some pictures in a minute that show how fascinating Cambodia actually is. These are some quotes from actual volunteer placement agencies or tour operators, again obviously focusing on the benefits and the good times that volunteers, particularly with this group, are going to have. I get a massive mailbag in Cambodia, and we get requests from lots of people, many young backpackers and gap year students who haven't got particular skills. They want to volunteer for a day or two in an orphanage. More worrying are educational professionals, teachers and the like, who I would have thought would have had some child protection training and some pastoral care issue training and child attachment issues training, but somehow think it's okay to come and work for a day in a Cambodian orphanage. And then we've got groups of individuals now who are asking us to help them to set up the Cambodian Siem Reap package, which included not only Angkor Wat, learning how to cook, but you go and visit an orphanage. Again, so what's the problem with orphanages? Well, here are some fascinating pictures from a fascinating country, and what the orphanage does, the only thing it can do is to remove children from these situations. They do not do anything to help people living in these situations to be able to move out of this and take care of themselves. All they can do is remove the child. All they can do for this couple is offer this lady to take the child off her. This is a typical source of the 75% of Cambodian kids in orphanages. This lady here, grandma, mum dead, looking after these children. Because resources have been sucked into the orphanage problem, there's no other option. The only thing we can offer this lady, in too many cases, is let's take the children from you. We talked about child abuse. This is an orphanage less than a mile from my house. Many volunteers going. It was established in this traditional Khmer house at the bottom, started by a British guy who had been an ex-social worker. If you look at it now, it pulled together more than 60 children. Many of them had been travelled more than 100 miles across Cambodia, so we've got internal trafficking already. But now it's empty. It actually looks a lot worse than that now. Why is that? Because that guy was this guy who was convicted and spent a year in a Cambodian jail, deported here last year and immediately rearrested because of issues that were outstanding in North Wales. What's my message for the tourism industry? To give up? Don't do it? Absolutely not. Tourism industry engagement in the developing world is absolutely vital. You are the largest sector. There's a moral responsibility to help the local destinations. Traditional donors, because of the economic crisis, are cutting back. We see that across the board. It's a business. You have to meet customer demand. You have to provide profitable products. There's less than 6 degrees of separation in my view. There's 3 degrees of separation between getting it right and causing a problem. Please, please, tourism industry, don't stop trying to help. Please try and do it better. Better means better research and better understanding of the problems that you're becoming involved with. Look and do some research, and maybe we can write some glitzy advertisements about going to volunteer in some of the community-based programs. And we would be very, very happy, as we do in Simreap and in other places, to work with the industry to find out how we can make a profit and also make a really positive difference. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Michael. I know Michael is very keen, he said it last year, he said it again, that we focus on ways in which the industry can do it better. None of this is about the industry not engaging with these issues and not creating the opportunities, but it is about doing it better. Over to you for questions.